Starlog is the most popular science fiction magazine in the solar system.
Pick up a copy of Omni Magazine today.
The December issue of Inside Sports, where you...
The 1980s newsstand was a vibrant, chaotic battlefield of glossy dreams and bold ideas. Yet, for every iconic title that defined the era, countless others flamed out spectacularly. These are the stories of ambition meeting harsh reality, of magazines done in by shifting trends, corporate mismanagement, and technological upheaval. From forgotten tech journals to short-lived satires, let's uncover 25 forgotten magazines from the 1980s that failed miserably.
I played at solitaire, but there was no secret movement or movement plotting, so it was pretty easy to just, do the I go, you go approach and just try to make...
Launched in 1980 by Simulations Publications Inc., Ares magazine was a bold attempt to carve a niche at the intersection of science fiction and the burgeoning tabletop role-playing game hobby. Each issue contained short stories and articles and included a complete pull-out strategy game, offering tremendous value. Despite this innovative format and high-quality content, Ares struggled from the start. It faced an uphill battle against the established titan of the genre, Dragon Magazine, which had the powerful backing of Dungeons & Dragons publisher TSR. As interest in niche RPG content began to wane, Ares could not sustain its subscriber base and was quietly discontinued after just 16 issues, a forgotten pioneer in specialized gaming journalism. But while one magazine fought a losing battle in fantasy, another was preparing for a spectacularly short-lived comedic offensive against a completely different institution. The early 1980s saw a surge in satire, but launching a humor magazine to compete with the legendary Mad was perilous. This was the fate of the simply named Comedy Magazine, which lasted for 4 issues in 1980. Its failure wasn't due to a lack of talent. It featured work from notable contributors like National Lampoon's Michael O'Donoghue and cartoonist Gahan Wilson. Instead, it succumbed to an identity crisis. It couldn't define what made it unique against the anarchic established voice of Mad or the sharper, more adult edge of National Lampoon. Without a distinct comedic perspective, comedy failed to attract a loyal readership and vanished almost as quickly as it appeared, becoming a footnote in publishing history. For owners of the TRS-80 microcomputer, Radio Shack's iconic machine, 80 Micro was an essential lifeline. As one of the most prominent magazines dedicated to a single computer platform, it was packed with type-in programs, hardware hacks, game reviews, and programming tips that empowered its dedicated community of users. For nearly a decade, it thrived alongside its namesake computer. However, its fate was intrinsically tied to its corporate sponsor. The magazine's core audience evaporated when Radio Shack began to pivot its strategy away from the TRS-80 line in favor of the IBM PC and its clones in the mid-80s. The specificity that made it indispensable became its Achilles heel, leading to its cancellation in 1988.
I'm looking here at some of the magazines that I used to absolutely live for as a kid, and that was Compute Magazine and Compute Gazette magazine.
Unlike single-platform magazines, Compute took a revolutionary what's best for the user approach, covering many popular home computers like the Commodore 64, Atari, and Apple II. Its famous Gazette editions provided platform-specific content under one umbrella, making it a powerhouse of general computing knowledge. Its downfall began with its 1987 acquisition by General Media, the parent company of Penthouse Magazine. This led to a disastrous culture clash and a profound audience and advertising base mismatch. The new management's attempts to shift content alienated its loyal, family-friendly readership of hobbyists and programmers. The magazine lost its unique voice and relevance, stumbling on until its eventual closure. This shift in corporate strategy was a common killer, and even a beloved magazine with a storied history wasn't immune to the changing tides of the industry. Widely recognized as one of the very first magazines devoted entirely to the microcomputer revolution, Creative Computing was founded by David Ahl, and served as an enthusiastic and accessible guide for the new wave of home computer owners. It was less about hardcore technical deep dives and more about inspiring creativity, featuring software reviews, practical programming tutorials, and thought pieces on the future of technology. Its end came not from a lack of readers, but from a strategic corporate decision. After being sold to major publisher Ziff Davis in the early 80s, the new owners began to favor their successful single-platform titles like PC Magazine. Creative Computing was deemed redundant in its portfolio and was shut down in 1985, ending the run of a true pioneer.
More pretentious than I already am. So I figured, let's have a little fun. Let's flip through these popular electronic.
A true giant of the hobbyist world, Popular Electronics literally made history when its January 1975 cover featured the Altair 8800, igniting the microcomputer revolution and inspiring a young Bill Gates and Paul Allen. However, by the early 1980s, the magazine struggled to define itself. To stay relevant, it was renamed Computers and Electronics in 1982. This move backfired, alienating traditional electronics hobbyists without successfully capturing the new computer audience, which was now being served by a flood of newer, more specialized publications. It could no longer compete with dedicated computer magazines or more focused electronics journals, and it ceased publication in 1985. A testament to the difficulty of navigating rapid technological change.
And TV program. Starlog magazine shows you special effects secrets, blueprints and robots, spaceships and aliens.
While it famously lasted well beyond the 1980s, Starlog's challenges began in that decade as market saturation loomed. It was the premier magazine for science fiction entertainment, offering behind-the-scenes access, interviews, and news on everything from Star Wars and Star Trek to emerging classics like Aliens. For a generation of fans, it was an essential monthly purchase. Its initial success, however, bred competition, not just from other print magazines like Cinefantastique, but eventually from the emerging Internet. While it didn't fail in the 80s, the period began slowly declining. The niche it once owned exclusively became crowded, and rising paper costs and falling ad revenue slowly chipped away at its foundation, setting the stage for its eventual end decades later.
Omni, the world's first major magazine of science, fact, fiction, and fantasy.
Omni was a unique and glamorous phenomenon. A high-gloss, large-format magazine that brilliantly fused cutting-edge science fact with speculative science fiction. Founded by Penthouse's Bob Guccione, it boasted stunning artwork, interviews with brilliant scientists, and short stories from legends like Isaac Asimov and William Gibson. For a time, it was wildly successful. However, its high production costs made it extremely vulnerable to advertising market fluctuations. The dual audience approach, once its greatest strength, became harder to maintain as popular science and sci-fi genres developed their own more specialized publications. By the late 80s and early 90s, declining ad revenue and the rising digital world siphoned off readers, and it ceased as a monthly print publication in 1995. Launched in 1988, PC computing entered a crowded field but found success by focusing on the IBM PC platform's practical needs of business and power users. It was known for its accessible how-to articles, hardware reviews, and famous Mad About column, which humorously critiqued tech flaws. For over a decade, it was a major player. Its demise, however, was accelerated by the dual blows of the dot-com crash in 2000 to 2001, which devastated advertising revenue across the tech industry, and the rapid migration of readers to free online tech news and review sites. Its parent company, Ziff Davis, consolidated its properties, and PC Computing was folded into the now-defunct PC Magazine in 2001.
It was the first magazine devoted solely to science fiction. Science fiction stories had made regular appearances in other magazines.
Holding the distinction of being the first dedicated science fiction magazine ever published, Amazing Stories is a legendary name whose history is marked by numerous revivals and failures. By the 1980s, it was already a veteran but struggled to maintain its identity and reader base. The decade's market was flooded with newer, flashier magazines and media options, including television and film franchises that captured the cultural imagination. While it continued to publish under various owners, it became a shadow of its former self, unable to compete effectively. Its long, slow fade-out culminated in its final cessation in 2005, a victim of the intense competition it helped create decades earlier.
Which was a very popular microcomputer magazine in publication for over 20 years.
For serious programmers and engineers in the 1980s, Byte was the Bible. It was the premier publication for in-depth technical computing knowledge, covering hardware design, operating systems, and programming languages with an authority and depth no other magazine could match. Its famous Programming the 68,000 and Jargon File series became legendary. Its failure was a slow burn. As computing became more mainstream, Byte's highly technical content began alienating a growing casual user base. Purchased by CMP Media in 1998, the new owners faced a harsh economic reality. The magazine's niche audience was no longer large enough to sustain the high costs of print. It was shut down abruptly, a stark sign that the era of deep-dive technical journalism was ending. InfoWorld carved out a crucial niche as a weekly trade newspaper focused on tech news and reviews for IT professionals and business users. Its timely reporting and influential reviews held significant sway in the corporate computing. Throughout the 80s and 90s, it was a powerhouse. Its failure is a story of adaptation rather than outright closure. As the Internet matured in the late 90s and early 2000s, readers increasingly turned to websites for immediate news, rendering a weekly print cycle obsolete. Facing plummeting print subscriptions and ad revenue, InfoWorld abandoned print entirely in 2007, becoming an online-only publication, a canary in the coal mine for the entire print journalism industry.
Right here in the magazine. So this is the winter issue of Atari Connection magazine, covering, I guess, all of winter, but you can tell it's the holiday season. We got
Atari Connection was the official house organ for Atari computer owners, distributed directly by the company. It was a combination of a user manual, a promotional tool, and a community newsletter, featuring game previews, programming tips, and user letters. It fostered a sense of belonging among Atari enthusiasts for a brief shining moment at the dawn of the home computer era. However, its existence depended entirely on its parent company's health. As the video game crash of 1983 ravaged Atari's finances and the company's subsequent missteps caused its market share to plummet, resources for the magazine dried up. It was a casualty of corporate turmoil, ceasing publication as Atari began its long, painful decline. This was just the beginning of the end for an entire ecosystem of publications that lived and died by the fortunes of a single brand.
Got some stuff lying on the floor by my Atari display area. It's very much of a vintage gaming memory of mine, maybe of yours as well.
Where Atari Connection was the official voice, Antic was the independent, passionate heart of the Atari 8-bit community. Named after a key software interrupt in the Atari's operating system, it was a magazine by users, for users. It was packed with type-in programs in BASIC and assembly, hardware projects, and in-depth game reviews that its readers devoured. For nearly a decade, it was an essential resource. But, like a plant whose roots are tied to a single tree, its fate was sealed when that tree fell. The commercial collapse of the Atari 8-bit platform in the late 1980s eviscerated its reader and advertiser base. Despite a loyal following, Antic could not survive the extinction of its host, folding in 1990.
I thought I'd have a look at another magazine that I picked up recently. And as you can see, it's Amiga World.
Launched to coincide with the revolutionary Commodore Amiga computer, Amiga World was initially there. With its stunning graphics and sound capabilities, the Amiga developed a cult-like following, and its magazine reflected that passion. It covered the machine's use in gaming, graphic design, and even early video production, celebrating its capabilities. For years, it thrived as the Amiga did. However, Commodore's poor management and eventual bankruptcy in 1994 strangled the platform. As the number of active Amiga users dwindled, so did the magazine's purpose. In 1995, production stopped. Amiga World became a publication for a shrinking island of holdouts. With no new hardware or software to review, it faded away a year after Commodore itself, a testament to unwavering but ultimately insufficient loyalty.
Well, coming up next is the latest issue of Analog Magazine. Let's go right into it.
Analog Computing was another devoted soldier in the army of Atari 8-bit publications, focusing particularly on the Atari 400/800 and later the XL and XE lines. It offered a mix of game reviews, programming tutorials, and software listings, catering to the dedicated hobbyist. It maintained a steady presence throughout the early and mid-'80s, but was operating in an increasingly crowded field for a finite audience. Its failure was a story of a slow bleed. As the Atari platform lost its commercial viability against the Commodore 64 and the rise of the IBM PC, the advertising and subscriber base for all Atari magazines withered. Analog Computing held on as long as it could, but ultimately ceased publication in 1989, another victim of the platform's demise. But the tremors of failure weren't limited to the world of silicon and code. The same forces shook the foundations of entertainment journalism, toppling even the most beloved film magazines.
Today we're looking at Fantastic Films magazine. This issue is from September 1980. This was a great magazine.
Fantastic Films aimed to captivate movie lovers with its deep focus on science fiction, fantasy, and horror cinema. It offered readers a treasure trove of behind-the-scenes photos, lengthy interviews with directors and special effects wizards, and comprehensive retrospectives on classic films. It was a beloved source of information for a dedicated niche of film buffs. However, it faced fierce competition from two emerging giants: Starlog, which covered broader sci-fi entertainment with more glamour, and Fangoria, which catered specifically to horror fans with its gruesome and exclusive content. Squeezed between these two specialized powerhouses, Fantastic Films could not secure a large enough audience and closed its doors in 1985. While larger rivals eclipsed one magazine, another struggled to hold its ground in an even more specialized and competitive corner of the gaming world.
These magazines are available online, I believe, for $2.99 US, and you get a direct link to the PDF.
The Space Gamer was a cornerstone of the tabletop gaming community, providing news, reviews, and strategy tips for various sci-fi and fantasy board games and war games, including titles from Steve Jackson Games, which eventually purchased it. It was a vital forum for a passionate but decidedly niche audience of gamers in the pre-internet era. The Space Gamer magazine ended its run under Steve Jackson Games in 1985, when the title was handed over to a new publisher, Diverse Talents Incorporated, DTI.
Jaws 3D. So if you're a huge fan of that film, or just kind of love it as a curiosity.
Cine Fantastique set the gold standard for critical and scholarly genre film journalism. Unlike its competitors, it offered exhaustive, issue-length treatments of single films like Alien and Star Trek, the motion picture, featuring incredible access and deep-dive analysis. It was less a fan magazine and more an academic resource for serious cinephiles. This very strength, however, contributed to its financial vulnerability. Its intense focus made it a niche product with high production costs. As print costs rose and advertising revenue dwindled in the 1990s and 2000s, it became economically unsustainable. The final blow was the Internet, which could instantly deliver news and niche content, leading to its eventual decline and cessation in 2006.
September issue of Inside Sports, where you can find out why Vince Ferragamo says his agent in the Rams management.
Launched to challenge Sports Illustrated's dominance, Inside Sports promised a grittier, more behind-the-scenes look at the world of professional athletics. It featured strong journalism and compelling photography, quickly developing a respectable following. However, it was plagued by financial instability from the start. The magazine was sold multiple times throughout the 1980s, with each new owner attempting to tweak its formula to find profitability. This constant upheaval prevented it from establishing a consistent identity. Despite a brief period of success under new management in the early 1990s, the magazine never overcame the massive losses incurred during its volatile first decade. It was ultimately sold off and shut down. The turbulent world of sports journalism was not the only arena where established giants faced unexpected and severe financial headwinds. Army Man, proudly billed as America's only magazine, was a short-lived comedy publication of the late 1980s. Created by George Meyer, who later shaped the humor of The Simpsons, the magazine specialized in sharp, surreal one-liners and quirky cartoons. Among its highlights were Jack Handy's now iconic Deep Thoughts. Though only 3 issues ever hit print, Army Man became a secret handshake in comedy circles. Its offbeat brilliance caught the eye of Sam Simon, who recruited Meyer, John Swartzwelder, and John Vitti for The Simpsons' original writing staff. Many other contributors, from Jeff Martin to Bob Odenkirk, went on to shape American comedy. In 2004, The Believer revived its spirit by reprinting the debut issue alongside interviews. Autograph Collector magazine made its debut in 1986, catering to a unique but passionate community of fans who treasured signatures as pieces of living history. Based in Corona, California, the monthly publication became a hub for collectors by offering celebrity interviews, verified addresses, and listings of in-person signing events. It also tackled one of the biggest challenges in the hobby, counterfeits, with detailed articles on spotting fakes. Beyond Hollywood, the magazine explored the world of autographs from sports stars, business leaders, and other notable figures, broadening its appeal. In time, the magazine shifted from print to an online-only format, adapting to the digital age while keeping collectors connected to the thrill of chasing ink on paper. California Magazine was a celebrated and award-winning publication that captured the essence of the Golden State's culture, politics, and lifestyle. It was a writer's magazine, featuring renowned journalists and long-form essays. Its failure was a classic case of mismanagement following a corporate takeover. Over time, the magazine lost its unique voice and prestige. Despite being sold again in a last-ditch effort to save it, the damage was done, and California folded in 1991, a shadow of its former self.
Mighty Mike coming at you on a Freaky Friday. We're doing our review of Circus Magazine 1986.
Circus was a leading voice in rock journalism for over 2 decades, known for its vibrant posters, band interviews, and coverage of the hard rock and heavy metal scenes. It thrived alongside the genre's biggest bands in the 1970s and early 1980s. Its decline was a story of failing to evolve with the times. As musical tastes shifted dramatically in the early 1990s with the ascent of grunge and alternative rock, Circus struggled to adapt its content, leaving it seeming dated. Furthermore, the rise of music television, MTV, and the internet gave fans faster, more visual access, making the monthly magazine seem slow and irrelevant. It continued in a diminished capacity before finally ceasing publication in 2006.
After Dark was an entertainment magazine that covered theatre, cinema, stage plays, ballet, performance art, and various artists, including singers.
After Dark was a unique and influential magazine dedicated to the performing arts, including dance, theater, and film. It was known for its sophisticated coverage and striking photography, often featuring avant-garde and LGBTQ+ artists long before mainstream publications acknowledged them. However, despite its cultural significance, the magazine struggled financially. The rising costs of print production, combined with a niche audience that limited advertising revenue, created unsustainable pressure. By the early 1980s, these challenges forced After Dark to cease publication in 1982, leaving a void in the landscape of arts journalism. Its demise highlighted the difficulties faced by niche publications in an increasingly competitive and costly media environment.